We'll find out the hard way.
I don't know how that stuff works.
That's all right. He's David, Pastor David Clinkscales, calling in live from Vlad the Impaler's castle in Romania. David, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. We're starting now, huh?
Yeah, you're in Romania, right?
Golden, yes. Slatina, Romania.
Now, how do you like it so far?
It's a beautiful place. Lots of great people. But I've definitely found out that just like anywhere else that I've gone, people are people everywhere. There are nice people, there are jerks, and you just got to deal with it. So
all in different flavors. It's yeah. And we were looking at an article today, and these articles pop up. And if you want to follow Pastor David Clinkscales on Facebook, it's kind of hard to spell. Spell your last name for everybody if they want to follow you.
Okay, it's Clinkscales. And just so you know, the name is just David Clinkscales. And it's a picture of me and my wife up there. And we have another picture with our two kids, Jace and Cadiz, and they're still relatively young, 8 and 5. So that's how you find me. There's no Pastor David. Side note, like we're not necessarily talking about this, but that really bugs me when I see people on Facebook or on Twitter. I've actually had some people friend me on the Bible app, YouVersion.
Yeah.
And their name is like pastor or reverend kind of thing. And I just think that's so swanky. I'm not comfortable with that at all. So yes, I am a pastor, but my name is David. I go by David.
I have a certain amount of dislike for that, but it gets disgusting, I think, when people are putting like the prophet such and such or the evangelist such and stuff. It's like, come on, guy. Yeah. Like you're trying way too hard.
Yeah.
And what's worse though is that I don't know which bothers me more, the fact that they do that or the fact that there's people that works on.
Right.
It's like there's people that will, I met a guy once that insisted on being referred to as doctor, and he was a physician. But I was looking at him like, yeah, but, like, congratulations, like you did the work and you've ascended to that station, but...
We're in an Applebee's.
We're in an Applebee's. You're not my doctor. Furthermore, I don't know that you actually went to medical school and graduated and then did your... you could just be pulling I'm not going to refer to you that way. Right. But what's funny is that, I have a friend and his name is Dr. Matthew, and he's there in Santa Barbara, and he received a PhD when he was like 26. Like, he's a brilliant guy. And I had to find out through other sources that he was a PhD, an actual doctor. And so now I refer to him as doctor, and he hates it. He can't stand it because it's like, no, I'm going to give you your respect because you're not a DB, you're not a Delta Bravo, you're not being a jerk about it. So I'm going to honor you in this way. You know what I mean? And and just to give the listener a little bit of background, I've said this probably a number of times before. Like there are a handful of whatever you want to call them, preachers, pastors, expositors, theologians, people who speak and teach at the same time on the subject of theology in the Bible. There's I could list every one of them that I will actually listen to. And it's a very short list. Ravi Zacharias is on that list, obviously.
Love Ravi.
Love Ravi. Love me some Ravi. It's like my whole aspiration in podcasting is just to get famous enough that I get to meet Ravi Zacharias. But, David is one of those guys, and not just because he's my friend and I know his heart on that level, but because I've heard the way that he preaches, the things that he focuses on, and I've always thought if we could just do that, like if everybody could just do that, I think Christianity would be in a much different condition that it's in right now. Pastor David, he posts some things online as little articles and blogs and things that sort of expose sort of the condition of the church, mostly in America. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, exclusively in America. And I always like him because David always asks people to chime in and say, "Hey, well, what do you think about this?" You know, and I always think very deeply about those things. I very rarely comment because I don't like keyboard conversations. I'm allergic to the idea. But this time it was like, okay, you know what? I finally have somebody that is a friend of several years that is in my time zone. And I can say, hey, let's sit down and talk about this because, you know, I don't have to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning to meet you at a certain time. It's like we're in the same zone now. And, you know, that's a huge blessing to me. So on today's episode, we're going to be talking about an article. And we're going to be talking about the condition of the church, because there's really, that's where my heart is you know, observing the condition of the church and trying to get people to fix it in themselves, because you know, there's no, well, I don't want to sit here and pontificate as I do. My podcast is mostly just stream of thought. Like I just sit down and I just start riffing on stuff. And if I do that right now, you're not going to be able to get a word in edgewise. So let me just start off by saying, you know, tell us about this article that you posted today and what it's about.
Yeah, so came across it normally as normally when I find stuff, I get online, usually in the mornings, sometimes before, sometimes after reading my Bible, to see what my friends have been posting. And I'm a part of a couple of different Facebook groups. One of them is like an apologetics Facebook group, which I enjoy. Another one is You Might Be a Heretic, which is kind of apologetic, but with a dash of snark added to it.
Always good.
Yeah, I enjoy it, right up my alley. So someone had posted an article by the Columbus Dispatch, and I thought it was from somewhere in Columbia, but no, it's Columbus, Ohio, I believe. And so this person, Danae King, had written an article about this church called Xenos, which has gotten some negative press, and they've had, out of 6,000 people, they've had a number of people come forward and say that they feel like this church has been heavy-handed, abusive with its members, expecting too much of their members. Mm-hmm. And so as I was reading through it, I had a number of thoughts, and I won't get into those just yet.
Well, that was my initial problem that I had with the article too, was that I also had a number of thoughts.
Yeah.
A number of them.
Yeah. And the article lended itself to that. The way that it addressed these quote-unquote issues, the things that happened, the things that people were saying, and I tend to be somewhat diplomatic in my way of looking at things, and I want to see this from a number of different angles. I don't take it from a real emotional knee-jerk reaction of like, oh, I hate this kind of stuff, because, well, not only do I think my personality does not lend to that, but I believe that my understanding of Scripture is to test everything and hold to the good, and to submit everything and hold everything captive and make it obedient to Christ. Right. And so I want to do that in my life, in everything. And I mean, let's be honest, unless you're talking with someone who is also like that, you can get lots of comments about, oh, you know, you're going too deep, you're thinking about it too much, sort of stuff. And my initial reaction to that, or response to those people, is, well, maybe you're not thinking about this enough.
Right.
But I think the world is needing people of both types.
Well,
yeah,
the I think the main accusation of the article itself is that these people are a cult. And so my first question would be to anybody who wants to discuss back and forth this issue is like, okay, well, what experience do you have with cults? Because I've never told this story on my podcast, but a lot of people don't know this about me. I once accidentally joined a cult, and
I didn't know that either.
yeah, I don't talk about it because it's embarrassing. But there's also there is a big cult in where David and I met in San Diego. There's a massive cult called the 12 Tribes, and there's several of these encampments all over the world. There's one in Israel. There's one in Del Mar, or not Del Mar, but yeah, they're huge. And it started out of the Jesus movement in the 70s, and some guy said, "Listen, everybody, come to me. Go sell all of your possessions, give it to me, and we're going to buy this land in Encinitas." So in the 70s, it was, they were just giving that land away. Now it's prime real estate. And they have a little restaurant there in Encinitas, and they work with their hands, and they all dress the same. And then when you go there, they give you a new name. Like you can't call yourself David anymore. Now your name is going to be Silas. And that's going to be your name from now. And that's how everybody, and they serve really good food, and they make really cool little things out of wood. But that is a cult. And they're very culty, they're very controlling, but at the same time,
so maybe for people that want to know, like, oh, okay, well, what does that mean? What is a cult? So what kind of things would you associate with cultic behavior or cultic groups?
Top down leadership. Mm-hmm. So vertical leadership, a vertical hierarchy, and control. Like that's the whole thing. There's a reason why cult leaders usually end up banging everybody's wives, and it's because it's the need for control, and that need for power and the need for control can never be satisfied. It's just like greed. You can never have enough, and that's the deal with the devil. And so these cult leaders, they start off, I think probably Jim Jones probably started off with like the best intentions, who knows, but then you realize like, oh wait, like I don't have enough control. And so then it gets into, taking other men's wives, and then it gets into pouring the Kool-Aid, because it's like that's like the ultimate sense of control is like, hey, if all these people kill themselves because I told them to, then I'll know that I was truly in control, and I'll be satisfied. And so whatever hint of that it's like it's like different degrees of being drunk. If you take just a shot of vodka, it's like, yeah, you can still drive a car. You'll be all right, but you are a certain level of drunk. And so when it comes to looking at cults, it's like, well, is there that top down overall sense that like what the hierarchy is demanding is your sovereignty for themselves, and that's, I think, if you're looking for telltale signs, I think that would be the first thing I would look for.
Right, and well, that fits with a couple of the comments in here in the article. They have comments from various members or former members who said that they felt that this evangelical church was spiritually abusive, isolationist, controlling, and manipulative. And so when I read those things, I don't immediately like jump on the I'm going to use a pop reference here. I don't jump on the Kavanaugh bandwagon.
Right.
Right. Is the accusation legitimate? Maybe. Let's look into it. But I'm not automatically going to say I'm with her or I'm with him because they're making this claim.
Right.
Like, you can't just make an accusation and whatever you happen to say is true. We know too much about human beings in general, and our tendency, I'm including myself in that group, our tendency to spew at the mouth things that aren't necessarily true,
yes,
just because we're ticked off about something.
Right.
So I'm legitimately wanting to know people's thoughts about this. You know, if people do have cultic experience, if they read these things and they're like, ooh, that's a warning sign, or if they're reading it and like, well, yeah, I mean, I guess you could look at Christian practice as being kind of cultic, because when someone claims to follow Christ, Scripture says they are a slave of Christ. That means your life is no longer your own, and your life is marked by a certain type of behavior that's different from the behaviors that you see in the world.
Right.
And some could see that as like, wow, why would you be controlled like that? Why not just live your life? Why not just do you, whatever that means?
Right. And I was thinking about that actually over the last couple of days, is that different type of behavior that is discussed in Scripture is, I think preachers don't spend enough time talking about how profound, when Paul talks about a new nature, it's like, like nature is what causes the sunlight to take a pine seed that's in the soil and turn that thing into a tree that takes carbon monoxide and cleans it and expels clean air. Like, that's nature. You know what I mean? Nature is why animals migrate. It's nature means like it's set. This is God's law and it's set. There's no arguing with it. A bear is going to eat you because it must. And a bird is going to sing because it must, because that's its nature. And when Scripture says like you're going to have a new nature, that's profound. So what it's saying is like you're still going to be in nature, but it's going to be completely different from all of the rules of nature that you have been previously exposed to. And I don't know where I was going with that, but
well, I'm following what you're spitting out here, because it seemed to me like a lot of the things that were said in there, I noticed a couple of buzzwords, buzz phrases that I have come to expect from people that want to continue on in a certain way, regardless of what the faith says. And so if you're walking in community with this body of believers, okay, which is what Christians refer to as people who are following Christ, we're a body made up of many different parts, and we all fill different roles. So if you're walking with people within this body and you're all pursuing Christ, it's easy to see the markers that God has given us in terms of, okay, if you are walking with Christ, your life is going to start looking like this. It's going to start having these markers. And if you're not walking with Christ, you're going to have these markers. And so as followers of Jesus, like we're told to not police each other. That's kind of like abusive language, but we're told to sharpen each other, to bear one another's burdens. And so if we're walking with someone and we see them veering off into sin or self-destructive behavior, like that sort of stuff, it's Jesus who tells us, hey, come along beside your brother, and
right.
Confront them in love and grace, but confront them. And if they listen to you, you won back your brother.
Right.
Like, it's a good thing. It's a positive thing. But many of the comments that were made in this article, I could see them being made of someone who might not actually be a brother or sister, or might not actually like someone coming up and asking them, like, hey, do you think this is what Christ is leading us to? They may not like that sense of accountability, and so we let out the buzzword of, oh, that's controlling. Oh, they're
Right.
being judgy. They're manipulating me. Now, could they be controlling? Could they be manipulating? Most definitely they could be. But that's not always the immediate place that we should jump to necessarily.
No, and I think, again, many thoughts, right? Like this, what I'm about to say, I have something that's completely the opposite to also say about it. So don't, if I'm
Oh, go for it.
making up, if I'm asking questions or whatever, believe me, I've got both sides covered, and sometimes even more than two sides. But like, one of the first things and this is going to sound horrifically sexist, but like one of the things that I noticed in the article is that everyone quoted was a woman, right?
Yeah.
Now, everybody knows that the female dynamic in social circles is different than the male dynamic, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Men tend to, go off into their own corner and drink their scotch and, tell fart jokes and, talk about nonsense and nothing, whereas women tend to go off into their circles and they talk about whatever it is that women talk about. And, the dynamics are different, whereas like in a group of men, a group of men will form, they'll all become friends, and then whoever is the strongest amongst that men will automatically rise to be the leader, because men are like that. Men understand, like, okay, well, if this guy is physically stronger than me, then when we're carrying the piano up the stairs, he's going to be the guy on the bottom because he's the stronger one, and that's just natural, and we understand that. If this other guy is more clever and cunning, when we go hunting to get our food, he's going to be on point. And we don't, like, not only do we not argue about those things, but we come very naturally to, like, okay, well, this guy's good at this, and so we're gonna push him to the front on this, because strength honors strength.
Yeah. And we make fun of each other in the midst of those things as well. And like that's the way that we develop relationships.
That's right.
We don't do that as women.
And we also and I mean that for our super Christian listeners, pardon the expression, but that amongst men that's called breaking balls, right? That's what we do. We insult each other, we pick on each other, and the reason why we do that psychologically is to keep from killing one another. Because secretly we're all thinking, like, this guy's going to try to kill me and steal my things and my women and my children. And so, there's that sort of, that tension of like, well, this is another man, and if we get into a fist fight, one of us could very easily die. And so what we do is we bring the fight up to a certain level of joking, like insulting. Whereas women, the social dynamic in women is like whoever is the prettiest, like, she's gonna get the worst of it. Like, her friends are gonna go tell, hey, listen, Monica's got herpes. Just I'm not trying to talk trash, but Monica, the pretty one, she gets around, and that's So again, when I'm reading this article and it's saying, well, this woman said this and that woman said that, and there is not a stitch of quotes in that entire article from a young man, because it's all young people in that article.
Yeah.
It's like, well, okay, so how much does this social dynamic? Because if it was a man, if it was a 20 to 22-year-old man, 25-year-old man saying, yeah, you know what?
Well, there was a 20-year-old. Well, it said Alex Craig. It's insane. You're an adult, but then the next line said she said it had to be. So maybe the Alex is
one of those names. And the thing is like, if it were 22-year-old David Clinkscales coming up to me saying, man, I think this place might be a cult. I think I may be undergoing, spiritual abuse. I think this, I think that. Like, my first response would be, well, David, to quote the movie The Hangover, did it kill you, bro? Are you dead, bro? Like, how bad does it hurt? Do you need to rub some dirt on it? Did the mean Mr. Pastor, did he beat, like, how bad is it?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And what I tend to do in situations like that, when someone brings something to me, I've found that I may not be the best sympathetic listening ear. I try. I don't mean to offend, but I have this natural aversion to jumping on whatever bandwagon someone is complaining about or saying they have a problem with this, that, or the other thing. It's natural for me to be like, okay, so are you seeing this correctly? You know, maybe the thing that he said to you wasn't the same as what you were getting.
Yeah.
Like you got a different message out of it. You know, when a church tells you that under Christ we are accountable to Christ and we are walking together, and the ultimate goal is to hit Christ likeness, to be more like Christ. So for me to say, are you becoming more like Christ? That could be a very judgy question to someone, especially if they know intuitively that the answer is no. I don't care so much about that right now.
Right. And that's, I think, one of the downfalls of the Western church. So it's not just America, but most of Europe as well. Like the further you get into Europe, you know, when you get into Eastern Europe, you start meeting like real, like devout Catholics and Protestants, like people who truly, like, they don't care what you think of them. They're just like, no, this is what I'm doing. Like, I don't care if you like it or not. You can sit here and talk about the Crusades and all the damage that Christianity has done, but I'm still like, this is what I'm doing. Whereas particularly in America, the idea of the popularity contest has truly gotten its stranglehold on the church. And so when you try to take somebody and sit them down and say, look, we're trying to be more like Jesus over here. Do you think right now, like, are you becoming more like Christ? They don't take that as a question of like, oh geez, am I? You know what? Tell you the truth, I am kind of disappointed in my own spiritual growth over the last, I've kind of had some hurdles and I feel like I've failed in those things and maybe I'm just not living the resurrected life. They don't think that. They think what you're doing is trying to put them on the spot so that you can, give them like some social media thumbs down and judge them. And it's like, no, it's not I don't care if other people like it. I don't care if other people like you. I'm asking you, like, do you, like, if this is what we're doing, if trying to become more like Jesus is what we're trying to do, is that what you're doing? And like it's
it's also something of a pecking order type thing as well. For me to ask that question of someone who's not on that same journey with you necessarily. It could be, oh, well, why are you asking that? Why? Because you think that you're better than me?
Right.
And that's hard because you can say, oh, no, that is not what I'm saying at all. Okay? And then you can practice, like lead by example. You can show, man, I see regularly, just as an example, I have a problem with my anger, or sometimes I know that I'm not treating my kids the way they deserve to be treated,
right.
And so that gives me a great opportunity to model for them what it looks like to genuinely apologize and seek someone else's forgiveness. Saying things like that, that's great. The problem is what I have seen is that it's few and far between the people who are actually willing to say, whoa, are you saying to me that you think you're better than me? Like that's what they're thinking, but they won't say it. They're just not going to spend any more time with you because in their mind, oh, you're implying that you're better than me.
Right.
You know what? I don't have time for you anymore. You're judgmental. And that could be the furthest thing from your mind.
Yeah.
But sometimes we're so hesitant to dig into those deeper conversations, because it takes time, it takes effort.
Well, I think that's the problem. One of the reasons I think that happens. There's a law, like a psychological law, that states, and it has a name and it has the whole thing. What it says is, it is impossible for you to know more than I think it's 150 or 250 people. It is impossible to know more than 250 people, and it goes back to like, we've lived tribally for thousands of years, and the idea of living in a city with 10 million people in it, like we have so many of today, that's just not, that's new to our DNA, and we're not used to it, right?
Yeah.
And churches were never huge. The first church was 13 dudes, Jesus and the 12 knuckleheads. That was the first church. It was 13 people, and then it was Paul and his little tiny churches that he started all over the place. But there's one of the main, again, it goes back to the popularity contest. Like one thing that goes on in the church right now is that you pull up this article and it's talking about a church that may or may not be a cult, but one of the things that it starts off with is, man, there's 6,000 people here. You cannot get to know 6,000 people, and it's like, look, if I come to you and I say, hey Dave, man, like, look, I'm a new father. I had 2 children in the space of 24 months. I'm losing my mind over here. That thing you talking about, like mistreat, looking at your kids and realizing like, oh, I'm being a crappy father right now. Like, I get it. I know exactly what that means. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I come to you and I get the rib spreader out and I crack open my ribs and I show you my heart and I'm like, look, man, I'm struggling over here. All right. And, that's what Paul was talking about when he talked about the circumcision of the heart, is because it goes back to that story of Joseph. And I think we've talked about this before, but in the story of Joseph, the way that he proved to his brothers that he was in fact their brother Joseph, after many, many attempts, was he lifted up his robe and said, who else has a ding-dong like this? It's only your father's children. Only your father's children bear this mark. And so when Paul was talking about the circumcision of the heart, he was saying, like, you have to show people your heart. You have to show people that you are one of the tribe. You're one of their tribesmen. Like, no, I belong here. See, I struggle with things. And when I realized that I was being short-tempered with my 15-month-old son, that I was being short with a 15-month-old baby. And I bring that to Jesus and I say, Jesus, what do you do about this? Jesus, and I come to my brother David and I say, David, what I mean? Look at what's in my heart. Look it. That's the mark. And you and I can do that because we're friends, because we're in fellowship, or sort of, because we're in fellowship. Yeah. But you can't. Since it is impossible to know 6,000 people. Because it's impossible to know 300 people. There's no way that you can
tribes within the group.
You can't do it. You know what I mean? Like and so now we have a situation where there's 6,000 people, and there's a whole bunch of people coming out of this organization who are like, you know what? I felt like I was being abused and controlled and manipulated and whatever. And it's like, okay, but do you? What? Let me ask you. Like, what is your in your walk with Jesus, what's it like for you? Do you, what are your struggles? What is it, the things that, that would be my first question to these people. Because again, I'm just like you. It's like I read, this lady said this, that lady said that. And then in the article, it's like this one kid's mother was outside protesting, saying this is a cult. It's like, okay, well, who are you? What kind of lady are you? Are you an atheist? Yeah. Are you one of these bitter old cat ladies? Like, who are you? Maybe, maybe. Yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry, I was going off there.
And we live in a judgmental culture in general, where having those conversations is the best thing for us, but in many cases we're not willing to have them. Yeah. And so we'd rather go on with whatever our perspective is, because some people have either learned, okay, I'm either gonna bring this up and be like, wait a second, there's some inconsistencies in things that you're saying. Nicely as possible, but you're labeled a Delta Bravo.
Right.
From that time forward. Or you just learn to shut up because you're just like, you know what, I'm not gonna wade into those waters. And there are a couple of passages that I've actually been coming back to a lot as I've been thinking about these things. One is Jesus told us, don't cast your pearls before swine. So there are going to be some people that are not going to hear what you want to say, and they're going to try to tear you to pieces for it. So don't even worry about it. He also tells us, you know, you go and you share in this one house. If they welcome you, stay there. If they don't, shake the dust of your feet off and move on.
Yeah.
Move on. And that is a lesson that I personally need, because I have a tendency to want to keep going and like, wait, no, you're misunderstanding what I'm saying, and I don't know why you're misunderstanding. And actually, it came at a time when I listened to your episode when you were sharing about your brother's murder. And you were like, some people, they're just stupid, and it's not as an insult, but they're just stupid. They do not have the mental faculties to rub together to make sense of the situation, and so they're doing what is natural, what is instinctive,
right?
And so in situations like that, I think of those proverbs, you know, don't go and grab a dog by the ear. And another one is, it's not a proverb, but women are told, you know, if your husband is in a fight with someone else, don't go grab those testicles.
Yeah.
You know? And so I'm thinking, yeah, you know, is this a situation where I really want to have a deeper conversation, or am I just going to be grabbing another guy's junk? It isn't going to be good for either of us.
Yeah.
You know, I need to just walk away.
It's that's a really tough one for me, because I definitely took the wrong path, and I've been realizing that now for some time, that I took the wrong path when approaching that particular problem. Is I took the path of like, well, I just, you know, if you rub me the wrong way even slightly, even once, then I'm just gonna write you off, because it's like I don't want to feel any pain from a stranger. You know what I mean? Like you if I don't know you, if I don't trust you, like and I'm, you know, because how many times have you gone to church and just, Pastor David here has a bit of a resume as far as his time in ministry, and some very baffling things have happened in his career as a minister, where I've looked at and it's just like, man, if those people didn't get it, if that guy was explaining it the way that he explains things and people still didn't get it, then there's just got to be no hope for those people, you know. And the problem with that is that that's like pseudo nihilism, you know, where I start looking at people and I just completely just judge. Like you're like, you know, like Jesus said, like when you look at people and you say in your heart like you're worthless, Jesus says like you're in danger of hellfire, my friend. You better watch how you judge people. Yeah. And I'm very quick to judge like that, where it's like, well, dude, you're causing me discomfort, so goodbye. You know, I don't need this in my life.
Yeah.
And this is the paradox of Christianity, is that you know, Jesus loved to preach in paradox. Like, if you want to find yourself, you need to get lost. And if you want to be healed, then you need to be, you know, realize that you're broken. And like, if you want this, then you have to do everything's opposite day with Jesus. And it's like if you want to be a Christian, you have to deal. This is the hardest thing about being a Christian, is that you have to deal with Christians. There's no Christianity outside of fellowship. You're not a Christian. You're just some guy who has some theological beliefs.
Yeah.
You have to get into the mess of humanity with other Christians and go through those hardships, and it's like, you know, like it's like the hardest thing. The other paradox is like the hardest commandment that God ever gave us was to be still, you know, to rest. It's like it's the hardest thing to do, is to be still, and it's that you know, because he tells King David, you know, like, be still and know that I am God. It's like that, you know, that's not in the original 10 commandments or the 613 points of the law, but it is a commandment nonetheless. And it's like, that's the hardest one. You know, we are busy people. We are fixing stuff type of people and whatever. And then here's God saying, like, listen, if you want to know true power, then come to a complete rest, and I will show, and you'll know it then. And it's the same thing, like, with, you know what I'm saying? It's tough. And it's the same thing with Christians. It's like, man, you get into Christian circles, and the you know, the first people that you meet are like the recent converts who are all just so happy and proud of the fact that finally they have something in their life that makes them better than everybody else. Like, I'm right. I'm with the right people now. And you know, and they're so busy, you know, showing off how grateful they are to be Christians. And that's like, you know, that's your Christians who are in, you know, their first to third year of being a Christian. And then you get, you know, then you meet, you know, the Christian who's been a Christian for 50 years, and oh boy, this guy's got it all figured out, man. Like, you know, and he's rigid and whatever. And like, you meet all these different types of people, and it's on you to find Jesus in those people. And it ain't easy.
Yeah. And there are some people who have been walking with Christ for that 50 years, that you said, and you know, they can be like, whoa, you feel like you want to take off your shoes when you're nearby them because, like, you don't want to burst into flames. Like,
right.
I feel like I'm in the presence of God because this man walks so closely with God. I just want to sit at his feet and learn what that is, to walk through life with God, and no matter what you go through. And what's interesting is the people that I've talked to who have those people, they're not like, oh, this is Pastor Jim who's like that, but it's this guy. He was a farmer, or he was an engineer, or he was whatever. He was doing something else in his day-to-day, workaday life. But the man walked with God. Yeah. You know, same. I hear women saying the same thing. It's very rarely does it come from a pastor. And that's one of the reasons why I don't think people need to give me respect or owe me some kind of respect because I've, you know, got an MDiv, or because, you know, I've got a doctorate, or I've got a PhD, or I teach at a seminary, or, you know, whatever kind of thing we want to do. It's a logical fallacy, you know. It's an appeal to authority. But where does our authority come from? But from the risen Christ. Right. And so we are either connected to him, and our authority is derived from him as like we're the moon and we're just reflecting his glory. Right. Or we're showing our own glory. And I don't want to be that second guy. I don't want to be showing my own glory. If anything, I find that sometimes maybe I'm a little bit too down on myself, like I've got nothing to offer, because, man, I know the condition of my own heart. I know the things that I struggle with that aren't Facebook official. You know, right. I know the times when I treat my wife poorly, you know, and you better believe I've got justification for that, you know, and I do it for a very good reason.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And
we all,
when I play into my kids, it's dangerous for my wife to rebuke me angrily with that sort of stuff when I'm in it, because I'm geared up.
Your blood pressure's going,
status, and I'm ready to hurt someone.
Did you hear that? Did you hear? I didn't realize that you were a fan of the show, but did you hear that episode I did where I talked about that pastor that was at the men's retreat, and he told that story? There was
I'm not sure.
I was going to Foothills Christian Fellowship there on East Bradley in El Cajon, San Diego, California, and
represent.
We went to the men's retreat up there in Julian. Yeah. And this guy started, like, he had preached the Sunday before, and he was kind of this short little fat guy, funny looking guy, wearing a cheap suit, and his wife was standing next to him, and she was tall and blonde and beautiful and whatever. It was like, wow, like I don't know how this happened, right? But good for you, sir. Good. It happens. But he gets on stage the first thing at this men's retreat, and he says, "Listen, guys, I'm going to start off, this week by telling you, like, I once cheated on my wife." And he laid out. He's like, you see, he explained, like, you have to understand what it's like to be a pastor. Like, you're up on a stage and everybody's looking at you, and because of the crowd dynamic, everybody in that room is somewhere in their mind they're thinking, well, this guy must be the most respectable person in the room because obviously he's got a microphone and he's up on a stage and everybody's looking at him. Like there is a something in our DNA that says, well, that guy is the head monkey, so we're all going to follow him. And he,
worth listening to.
Yeah, and he explained that, and he was telling people, like, he's like, you don't understand, like everybody's going through something. You have no idea what people are going through, and this is what. And like that was the first time like I realized, like, oh, okay, like this guy truly gets it. You know what I mean? Like if you want to offer your services to me to disciple me, it's like you need to show me that you're in my tribe, that you know what it's like to to have that moment of self-reflection when you realize, like, I raised my voice to my wife, or I was short with my kid, or I didn't give my client their due. I don't know. I misrepresented the product to my prospective client, and he bought it, and now because by God, like I was thinking about my bills, and I really needed that money, so I just left that one little thing out, and so I like.
Oh, I do remember that story. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So that's there's a gaping lack of that aspect in today's Christianity, and it's weird because Paul spoke exhaustively on that topic of, like, look, transparency. You have it's the whole. You can't. I can't tell you how many times I've met lifelong Christians who would sit there and just look at you with just dead in your eye and say, no, I've never committed a sin. I've been a Christian my whole life. My parents took me to church since I was a week old. I've always been a Christian. I've always been forgiven, and therefore I've never committed any sin. And I look at that and it's just like, I mean, I don't think that those people are particularly bad. I don't think they're going to hell. I just think that they've lived their entire life without ever connecting with the power source. They've never plugged in.
I've never heard anyone say anything like that. So
never?
You've had a much more enjoyable life than I have in terms of travel and meeting people of so many different cultures with your walk across the States and Europe.
Yeah.
But that's surprising to me that anyone would even go so far as to make a claim like that.
It's surprising to me that you've never heard anybody say that because you've been, you've been the guy on stage with the microphone, and so would imagine you've communicated, had long talks with a lot.
Yeah, we've dealt with different issues in the church world. It's more our tendency to recognize something in someone else, but not see the gaping problems on our own.
Hey, would you refresh your camera? Because you're frozen on my screen.
Yeah, I don't know how.
Just hit the button again. Yeah, there you go.
There we go.
So going back to this article, it's two things really quick. No, I do not believe that this is a cult, and also let me just say this: yes, I believe absolutely that it is a cult. Because it's one of it's very difficult to manage power, and you've seen some people, like there's two pretty good examples of what happens when somebody realizes that they can no longer manage the power. And two very different examples. One guy I think did it right, and the other guy did it wrong. One guy who I think did it wrong is Rob Bell. So he was, he was a pastor of a huge church, and he realized, like, oh, I don't belong here. I don't belong up on this stage. I don't belong having this much power over this many people. And so he moved to Santa Monica with his millions of dollars, and got, that he got from selling books on the Oprah Winfrey Show, and created his own, one congregant little cult. And now he just sits there and writes books describing his weird new religion, and everybody buys it because he was on Oprah. But the other guy is what's his name? Tony Chen. The guy that was the pastor there in Thousand Oaks. Francis Chan. So so here's a guy who was just like, yeah, I don't belong up on this stage. I absolutely cannot handle this much power. This is ridiculous. And so he just left. Yeah. And went on his own little trip, and now he's back, and he's just like, yeah, I'll give sermons, but I'm not gonna let that spike back in my vein of power where everybody comes to me and thinks that I'm the guru. But there's even not it's hard because all we see is what's visible. You know what I mean? Like Rob Bell and Creflo Dollar and Joel Osteen and these kind of people, they're visible because people write blogs about them, and Oprah Winfrey has them on their show and whatever. Like it makes it appear like that is the whole of Christianity. And even I have to stop myself from believing that. It's like, no, there's the backbone of Christianity in America has to be something else, or else we're all doomed, and therefore it must be something. The foundation and the infrastructure still has to be in there somewhere, but at the same time, it's like every time I go to a new church, it's like it's that thing where it's like, oh look, we finally ascended to the level where we can have a coffee shop inside of our foyer, and we've got the greeters outside, and they're all in shape, and they have all their hair, and they're all good looking, and whatever. And then you go in through the doors, and we're going to sing these exact same 3 songs, 2 of which are from Hillsong. Then the assistant pastor is going to tell a joke to set you up for tithe time. Then there's going to be one more song during the tithe, and then you're going to get the 20 to 45 minute theological lecture, and then 2 more songs during the altar call, and then y'all better get out of here because we got to do this all over again at 11:30. And and it's all, the formula and all that. It's like, that to me is like, when I see that, it's like, all right, number one, I'm already out. I already don't really care to hear anything that you people have to say, because this cookie cutter, I've seen this literally my whole life, and I'm done with it. You know what I mean? That pastor's never gonna be my friend. I'm never gonna hang out with that guy. Why should I listen to his thoughts on the sayings of my master? You know what I mean? Like the resentment kind of kicks in, and that's something that I have to work out in my own heart, like how to get over that. But at the same time, I know I'm right. I know that guy's never gonna come over to my house and say, Pete, man, let me tell you about last night when my kid was being loud. And I was running a bit of a temperature, and I lost my marbles. That guy's never going to do that. I'm never going to see that guy's heart. So it's like, well, then you're not. I have no verification. I have no way of knowing if you're in my tribe or not.
Yeah. And podcast land. This is one of the areas that Pete and I, when we first met, had so many great conversations together, because the church culture that he just described is not something I've ever really been familiar with. I've gone into large churches kind of like a tourist or a vacationer, and so I've seen what they do, and no, I'm not a fan of it, but I've always been a part of a smaller to medium-sized church, tops like 300 people. For the churches that I've been a member of or a pastor of.
That's how it's got to be.
Do what?
I'm saying that's how it's got to be. Like I don't think Christianity works out. Once you get too far north of 250 people, it's just
And even there, but you've still got the same kinds of issues. I mean, like I had a parishioner, I guess is what you call him, a member of the church that I was pastoring that actually told me that they didn't want their church to get any bigger. This is good right here. And so, like, it wasn't until I heard that I started thinking, okay, well then, let me see, how can I pastorally plan messages so that they're getting the things that they need to be hearing? And so I was like, all right, well, let's go through Galatians. Let's learn that salvation is by grace through faith in Christ alone. And since it's all of grace, that's what we share, the grace of Christ. We call people to follow Christ. And then I can go into evangelism. Well, I never got to evangelism, and I never actually got to finish Galatians either. You meet people of all different stripes, no matter what size church you're in. And, you could be in a church of 20 to 40 people, and the pastor could still be as equally unapproachable.
yes, yeah,
And I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm saying, like, that's just the reality.
right.
There's some personality things at play there. Also,
Hold on. You cut out there, Dave.
About us.
Can you hear me?
Okay, yeah.
Say that whole last sentence over again. You were cutting out.
Okay. Okay, let me go back. Okay. So there are personality things at play, but there's also the fact that we develop a certain way or method of doing our own life and doing our own ministry together.
Yeah.
And I personally think that no matter what tradition you come from, what denominational background you're from, you have to be willing to look at the sacred cows that you're used to
Right.
worshiping and figure out a way to kill them.
Right.
And that is an uncomfortable thing for many people, especially the longer you've been in the church, you've been raised up in the church. It's difficult to start talking about sacrificing those sacred cows that you've put over next to the instruction of God. And this is exactly what Jesus said when he said, man, you forsake the law of God for the sake of your man-made traditions.
Right.
That
is not, by the way, that is not a popular sermon to give, and it's weird because that's exactly what Jesus was saying. Is like, man, you guys, God told you to wash your hands for you. That was for your health, and you've turned it into this whole ceremony. You get your hands wet, you wash them 3 times on top and 3 times on bottom, and then you rinse, and then you have your holy little dish towel to dry your hands off with, and like you've made this whole ceremony when the whole time, like, the reason why God told you to do that because there's these little tiny animals called germs, and they're everywhere. Some of them are good, some of them will kill you, but that's why God told you to wash your hands. God was not trying to give you another method in which you could please him. God was giving you something to please you, and this is what the law, and
so you will live,
so that you'll live, so that you won't have diarrhea and dysentery and all kinds of weird sicknesses from not washing your hands. And and that's exactly what Jesus was saying. Is like you've done well. You've done well to tithe your 10% of your mint and 10% of your whatever it was that you said. But he's like, man, but you've lost it. You've lost like the reason. Like all of these laws, they're all expressions of God's love over your life, and you've missed it. And that sacred cow of the building, not the church being the body of Christ, but the building and the accoutrement and you know, the new tradition. And not all. Listen, I've really changed my tone on tradition. Like I have a number of friends who are Croatian Catholics, and these people are lovely people, right? Like, and they explained Catholicism to me by like walking me through the traditions, and it's like, well, this is why we have, you know, this tradition, and this is why we have that tradition. And I looked at it and I was like, oh, this is beautiful. Like, I get it now. I understand now. Like, this is, like, yeah, I think I could do that. You know, not.
So is it possible that sometimes we misunderstand the reason why people do certain things or have this
Tradition? Yeah. But like if you go to Catholic Church, they have the 12 pit stops or whatever they're called, the 12 stations, right?
Yeah.
You go to church and it's like the first
of the cross.
The Stations of the Cross, and the first one is the birth of Christ, and like when you go and you stand there and you're like, oh, this is how Catholics train their children to remember, like, you know, the birth of Christ, the exodus to Egypt and then back, and then, you know, King Herod killing all the babies, and then, you know, the betrayal, and then the crucifixion, and then the resurrection. It's like, this is how we train ourselves to remember. And that word remember is a word that God says over his people thousands of times. He's like, remember, remember, remember. Yeah. And you look at that. But when you start worshiping the tradition, when you start thinking like, well, as long as I hit my 12 stations, I'll be good. Because that's truly what God wants from me. He doesn't want me to think about the crucifixion. He just wants me to stand at the station about the crucifixion and ponder the fact that it actually happened. It's like, no, it's not you standing there thinking about the crucifixion, the picture and the artwork and whatever that's going to save you. You know, like it's and there's a lot of those golden cows. In fact, I was just talking about this a few weeks ago, when it's like how is it that the Jews, they saw the parting of the Red Sea, right? They saw God split the ocean, and just days later, Aaron, the high priest, is fashioning a golden cow for everybody to worship, and they did it. It's like, how is it that you could have seen such a thing and decided that your ways, like your comfort with worshiping the golden cow would be superior to worshiping the invisible, unseen God, when you just saw what you saw, you know?
And here's the thing, I don't even think that account was, oh, we don't know about this God anymore, let's start worshiping another God. They built that, and Aaron was like, this is the God that led you out of Egypt. It's giving them something to look at, so they can not be speaking, well, you know, there's this God that's been leading us in this way, and he did all these things, but we can't actually see him. Well, here's something that you can actually see.
I never thought about that.
Yeah, I would even be willing to even try to give them the benefit of a doubt, you know, that, okay, they were trying to do right, but they were not doing what God had called them to do.
Yeah.
Now, true, the law wasn't given before that time, but people had been following God since Adam and Eve. But Scripture makes it very clear that it was it at the time of Enoch that people actually started calling on the name of the Lord? Something like that, early Genesis. And so prior to there being the Jewish people, the Hebrew people, this tribe of insignificant people where God would place his name, people were still seeking God. And as early as there were people, there were deviations away from what the generations before them had done when they were worshiping God. And so you've got these cultic practices, and we're going to start doing this, and at some point in time fertility gods came into the mix, and then god of the valleys, the god of the mountains, and like there's a god for everything under the sun, because we were seeking not the Lord, but we were seeking prosperity, and the Lord was not worthy of our time unless things got difficult. And so rather than seeking the God who is, we wanted to seek, okay, who is the God who is going to give me what I'm looking for?
Right.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So God made us in his image, male and female. He created us. And we returned the favor by making God in our image in every turn. And I think we're still doing it today. We just don't have idols in most places.
Yeah, we've shed that tradition of idols, but the problem itself is very much still there. And we do like I was saying that the other day, like if you were to go to Joel Osteen's church, just grab anybody who's a dedicated member there, and just pull them aside and be like, I mean, do you really think, because Joel Osteen, I've seen him stand there on stage and be like, you know how I've got all this money in the mansion and this wonderful building he's in, and like this beautiful suit that I'm wearing. It's like God, it's God. God gave me all this stuff, and not saying it directly, but implying like, dude, I've got it figured out. Like I figured out how to worship God. This is why I have so much stuff. And if you know what I'm saying, like, yeah. He didn't use those exact words, but that's what he was implying. And if you pull somebody aside and say, no, hold on a second, like, just come with me and just talk with me for 1 week. I'll give you $100,000. Just come and talk with me for 1 week, and we're just going to go over Scripture. We're going to go over the life of Christ. We're going to go over the teachings of Jesus Christ, and we're going to match it up to this man's life. Do you still think, now that this week is over and you've spent all that time with me, do you still think that Joel Osteen is the guy that you want directing your thoughts as far as it applies to your relationship with the Almighty? And that person will probably say, well, hell yeah, obviously the guy's got a private jet, don't you know? Obviously God loves him. Yeah. I just need to get God to love me as much as God loves him, and then I'll be cool then. And that's the idol now, is the prosperity gospel. I mean, if you think about it, it's almost like it was supposed to happen, because we are the most prosperous people in the history of the world. Mm-hmm. So having Christianity become tainted by that is, I think, a very natural, like almost a fate. Like that was definitely going to happen, but because we didn't think, because the leaders of old didn't really, it's like, Billy Graham, who, by the way, I hear is one of those guys. Like you hear, there's people that tell stories. They were like flight attendants and whatnot, and they met Billy Graham on a flight, and they were like, yeah, dude, this guy was the most humble man. Like this was just a lovely, lovely human being. Just the nicest. He was one of those guys. But even Billy Graham, like, he got broadsided by technology, because when he came on the scene, microphones had just been invented, and television and radio had just been invented. And the idea that you could get on an airplane and fly to Hamburg or London or whatever, that was bizarre. Like you might as well have been telling people, well, I'm going to get on a spaceship and fly to Germany. Because airplanes were brand new, and then all of a sudden, here comes this guy, and he's got a perfect and pure message of repentance. Like he preached the gospel of repentance, just like Jesus did. Yeah. And the problem with Billy Graham is that, like, he was in a situation where instead of talking to a massive crowd of 200 people, he was talking to a massive crowd of 30 to 70,000 people. And he didn't know what to do, and he talked about this towards the end of his life. He was like, look, the altar call. Listen, I'm sorry about that, everybody. I was a young kid, and I didn't know what I didn't know what to do. I had tens of thousands of people ready to accept Christ into their heart, and I had to come up with something, Johnny, on the spot. So I invented the altar call. Sorry, everybody. You know what I mean? Like, and now, like, and that's why I still will listen to Billy Graham, because at the end of his life, he knew, yeah, I really screwed that up. Sorry about that. Chuck,
Swindoll?
No, Chuck Smith, the guy who started Calvary Chapel.
Yeah.
At the end of his life, he was like, "Listen, everybody, I realize now that turning this thing into a franchise like a burger joint was clearly the wrong idea, and now I've created a bunch of monsters. I've got Mike McIntosh, and I've got what's his name, Miles McPherson down there in San Diego, and I've got these guys up here in Costa Mesa, and it's like all these people, they're just rich, people whose their whole justification for what they do is like, well, obviously I'm doing the right thing because there's 10,000 people in my building every weekend. Obviously I'm right. Because these people are coming to me. And Chuck Smith, like at the end of his life, he was like, "Yeah, I'm sorry, everybody," and we have golden cows now. And if we listen, like if we go back and we listen to what these men said at the end of their lives, I love Chuck Smith. He said a lot of really wrong things, but he said a lot of right things too.
Yeah.
Billy Graham. I agree with very nearly everything that guy ever said, but not everything.
Yeah.
And there's this going back, and I'm sorry to have done this, but like let's try to get back to this article of Xenos Church up there in Columbus, Ohio. It's like, look, I think my ultimate statement would be this, and see, like we've been talking for an hour and a little over an hour. This is why I don't ever respond to your post, because it's like, these are my thoughts. Now you've got my thoughts, And we look at this church and it's like, well, are they a cult? Well, sure, they're a cult. They're a church in America with 6,000 people. There's somebody at the very top of that who has become very financially comfortable. Whoever's at the very top of that guy's kids, he's never worried about how he's going to pay his medical bills. He's never worried about how he's going to pay off his student loans, right? He's not worried about his mortgage payment or his cars. Like the trials of life have gotten outside of his wheelhouse. He has 6,000 people or more who all look to him as the diviner of God's word. Nobody can handle that kind of power. No one. We're not equipped for that. We're not equipped. We are equipped to be the chief. If we ever do ascend to the level of chief, then your tribe, by this particular law, and I'm going to have to look it up, but by this particular law, your tribe needs to be 250 members or less. That's because you're talking about managing people. This is why Moses, God never wanted pastors. And you can find that if you go back to, when Moses was walking around the desert with, 6 million Jews?
Moses?
How many Jews
Not 6 million.
Was it 4 million? It was a lot.
But it was a lot of people.
So here's Moses, and God told Moses, like, listen, you have to be the priest to these people. When these people have a problem, when they're in an argument with their neighbor, or if they're trying to get a divorce from their wives or husband, they're all going to come to you. But it was millions of people, and Moses kept crying out to God, saying, listen, God, I can't handle this. And God told Moses he would tell the people, like, you have to go back to your tent and seek my face, and I will guide you through this. And Moses kept going back to God saying, listen, this isn't working. They're not coming to you. They keep coming to me, and I can't handle it. I'm just one dude. And then finally God says, okay, Moses, fine. Just set up, this priest class. And then that way, then each one of these little...
Hold up, gotta correct there. So this wasn't actually something that Moses did. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came by and saw how the people were coming to him all day long.
Yeah.
And Jethro said, "Oh, this is no good. They're going to wear you out, and it's going to be worse for the people. So take people, men who are filled with the Spirit of God, and." He gives like 4 qualifications of who these people should be. They shouldn't be open to bribes and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
They need to be godly people, and make them rulers over hundreds and over thousands. And they can handle all the little things, and if something's too difficult, then they can bring it to you.
Right.
Which is interesting because, like Jethro, he was not among the Jewish people, but that's wise counsel.
Yeah.
You know, to have a division of labor, you know, and God said, yes, let's do this. I will still be the one who speaks with you. You will be my mouthpiece to the people. And I mean, we see that, and you said something about, you know, that God never intended for there to be pastors.
Well, the reason I say that is,
disagree with that.
There's
just in the sense that there's pastor, there's shepherd, there's overseer, there's bishop. Those four terms are used interchangeably in the New Testament, and it refers to someone who shepherds the flock.
Right.
So they have elders who would preach predominantly. They would have elders who would lead over this, that, or the other people.
I see. I think I need to find a better way of explaining what's actually going on in my mind when I say that. Like there has to be men and women that, for whatever reason, they have the time to just sit there and nerd out on scripture, read all the books, read all the commentary, and then get back to us and tell us what they figured out. There has to be that, you know. But what I was getting at was like there's two places in scripture that are profound in this area where what God truly wants from us becomes it's kind of hidden in the code, if you will. And I'm not talking about Bible code, people, but that part where Moses is burning the candle at both ends, and he's like, I can't handle this, and he cries out to God, and God says, all right, well, listen, here's what you do. But the fact is that it didn't work like that before. God never told Moses, like, here, I want you to set up this hierarchy to work this way.
That's right. That's right.
Now, if we skip forward another 800 years, or whatever the math is, we come to King David, and at that time, after King David had brought the ark back into town, he built a tent for the ark, and that was the Holy of Holies. It was in a tent, like you see in movies, like Lawrence of Arabia type movies, like the Pasha has a tent, whatever. That's what the tent was like. And King David, who for some reason had a profound understanding of architecture, and that's weird because he was a shepherd, and a warrior, but for whatever reason, he had a really deep understanding of architecture. And so he goes to God, and he says, God, listen, I'm going to build you this really fancy house. Everybody's going to love it. People are going to come from miles around and see it's going to be beautiful. Like, people are really going to want to know about this God guy after I'm done building this. And God says to him at first, he says, no, I don't want that. And although what I'm about to say is not found
I've never had that. I've never asked you to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
He and it's not written in there, but like what I feel like God is communicating in that is like, look, it is important for me that my people understand that I am the God that dwells in their tent. And the reason my presence needs to be held in this tent is so that people have that visual connection of like, he is the God of the tent. And the minute we build this fancy schmancy structure, then people who they themselves do not also live in a castle are going to think, well, that's the God of the castle, and I don't live in a castle, so he must not be my God. And
God is here
in the tent,
not there.
Right?
He's here.
And I think that we have made that same mistake that King David made, where like we as Americans we got so rich and prosperous that we went to God and we said, well, listen, now we want to build these mega churches and really display how rich that the God of the Christian people has made us. That we have thousands of people who come and meet with us, and God, I don't believe, just like in the case of the first temple, in the case of like the way that the hierarchical structure was built by Moses, that although you do need a hierarchical structure, but I think that it has to happen organically. And yes, you have to have a place of meeting. You know, you have to have that temple, but you know, just because you begged God long enough that He finally gave you what you wanted, doesn't mean that it was what God wanted for you. And then here comes Jesus 700 years later, and He's like, I'm going to tear it all down, and then I'm going to be the temple. You know, and we've gotten away from that. Is that we've rebuilt the temple out of stone and mortar again, and I think that with some of the hard times that are definitely coming, as we can see now with, you know, things heating up in the Ukraine, and you've got the European Union talking about give us your sovereignty, and we want to build our own military to protect ourselves from the United States, and then you've got what's going on the southern border, and you've got people in America who can't even figure out which bathroom they belong in because there's 57 different genders, and you know, and there is no truth, and everything is meaningless, and there's this nihilism that's going on. It's like everything is kind of coming to a head right now, and I believe that this too is a good thing. That this hardship is going to force people like the ones in this article to really go home and be like, yes, but do you know Jesus? Maybe these people are a cult, maybe they are controlling and manipulative, but that doesn't excuse you from like, do you know Him? You know, that was my takeaway.
Yeah, and on what grounds do you make the claims that you're making? I think it's going to be a lot easier in years ahead to distinguish between those who simply call themselves a Christ follower and someone who actually follows Christ.
And those who walk it, yeah.
You're going to be able to tell. And largely I think that's because of persecution. I think in America we haven't really had to deal with persecution so much. And that's one of the things that I've loved about being here in Romania. My wife, her family, she is the descendant of 2 generations of Romanian Baptist pastors, and her grandfather was persecuted and threatened and tortured under communism.
Very real, yes.
And so very real.
Yeah.
It's not in a book, it's actual. And so it makes me want to knock on my forehead and like punch through the screen when I'm reading about these Americans that are pushing for socialism or communism because they have some idealized view of what it is. And it's like, you know, you say that because you're ignorant.
Right.
I'm not trying to insult you. You're just ignorant.
You're stupid.
You don't know
This is
what you're talking about.
This is exactly why Dietrich Bonhoeffer wrote that piece where he was like, listen, I'm looking at 2 things here. I'm looking at evil and I'm looking at stupid. And let me tell you something. Stupid is far more dangerous. Evil can be defeated. You can kill it. But there's no killing stupid, and like, you know, and like he wrote that whole there's that whole piece of, I'm not going to get into it right now, but that's the thing, is that it's like, listen, youngster, you don't have any stamps in your passport. I tell you what, why don't you come down to Albania right now, where they still have support groups for torture survivors from communism, from socialism. Why don't you come to the hospital where my baby was just born a week ago, where there's holes in the wall and there's filth on the floor because it's all free, it's all socialism. Yeah, I didn't pay a dime when my son was born. You think like, oh, isn't that better? It's like, no, you should see where he was born. He's lucky to have made it out of there alive. You know what I mean? Like it's like living in the Stone Age, and that you are right. It's like the problem is that there's 340 million of them, and you can't take every one of them and be like, look, you need to come up with $700 for a plane ticket, all right? And then you need to fly to Bucharest, or you need to fly to Tirana. I'll pick you up at the airport, right? You just need to scrape up enough dough to get yourself there, and I'm going to show you the error of your ways.
In the place with me,
right?
Yeah,
Right.
You can stay in my place, so you'll be
relatively comfortable. Yeah.
But you're going to be able to see as you're driving through the streets. Whoa. Okay, you drive on the right side of the road still, so that's similar. But everywhere I look, things just look different.
Yeah.
Why is that? And then you're going to talk to people, and you're going to see these things that we've been seeing as expats.
Yeah.
It's not made up. It's not something that we're trying to chicken little skies falling kind of stuff. Like, this is reality. This
right.
is what in America was founded to escape the kind of tyranny of people. Now, we've got our own kind of tyranny of government that we have to deal with, and I think the time is coming, might already be here. Like, actually, you mentioned this in one of your other podcasts about, like, hey, get on these different sites. Here are different sites, and when this stuff gets shut down, and it will happen, we're going to all connect on these sites because they're not going to be controlled. They're not going to shut you down from this sort of stuff. It's like, there are some people that make fun of that as like doomsday type stuff. No, man, this is
already happening.
Military 101. This is like, you look to the future. What is the potentiality of what is coming?
That's it. Yeah.
And prepare for it. If it doesn't come, awesome. Okay, I'm first to stand up and say, yeah, it didn't happen. But if it does happen, don't be the guy that's running around punching your neighbor so you can take the loaf of bread that he just punched someone else.
Because that's what's coming. It's like people who would say, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. It's like, okay, well, slow down. Think about it this way, right? There's 20 million people in the greater Los Angeles area. 20 million people in the greater Los Angeles area. Los Angeles does not have its own water supply. They get it from somewhere else. And if that water supply is ever cut off, you're going to have 20 million people without water. Now, how many things can you write down within the space of 10 minutes that could possibly go wrong with that scenario? 20 million people that are suddenly thrust into fight or flight.
I've been drinking water this whole time. Yeah, I drink water like crazy. I don't have access to water. I can only imagine what my body is going to do. The first time you have to go to the bathroom, you're going to start seeing, oh, wow, I use water for that as well.
Or just like, hey, there's no water, and if I don't, it's been 3 days since, I've stayed cool, I've stayed out of the sun, so I've been able to live 3 days. But if my son doesn't drink water in the next few hours, he's literally going to die. So guess what, neighbor? Either you have to go or my son has to go, and I get to be the one who picks. So I'm sorry, neighbor. You came up short in this contest.
I love my son more than you.
Right.
So sorry.
And multiply that concept by 20 million. I mean, that's a crazy. And so when people say, like, because I was saying the other day, it's like you've got Angela Merkel right now talking about forming a European Union military for the express purpose of protecting themselves from China, Russia, and the United States. Not only that, but Germany is the head of the EU. Germany now controls the European Union, so that makes it not once. That makes it not twice, but a hat trick. 3 times Germany has conquered Europe in the last 100 years. That's 3 times, people. How many, and people said, like this lady said to me the other day, she goes, that's crazy, Pete. Surely it's not going to be like that. It's like, well, surely it is, because this isn't the first time, and it's not the second time. It's the 3rd time. And you know what I mean? They've conquered Europe now 3 times.
Notice the trend.
There's a trend here, people. And we're not talking about a large swath of time. I knew a guy that like I was very close to and loved very much, and like I knew him very well. I knew a guy who fought in the war against the Germans in the first one. In the 1910s or whatever, in the First World War. My great-grandfather, whom I loved dearly, like I knew that guy. So clearly it wasn't that long ago. I knew a guy from then. You know what I mean? So 3 times in 100 years. So there's some things coming down the pike. And just like you said, it's like if it doesn't happen, I will get in a long line of people's asses who want me to kiss it because I was wrong, and I will gladly do that, because nothing good ever came out of any of those two conquerings of Europe. And so if I'm wrong, I'll be the first person to be like, hey, look at me, I'm the big idiot, and I'm still alive. So is everybody else. But the trend would say otherwise, And again, it goes back to like what you said. It's just what's on the list, what's on the menu of probabilities. Los Angeles has 20 million people, and they don't have their own water supply, and they're standing on top of a gigantic plate. What are the possibilities? You know what I mean? Germany has a tendency to take over Europe every 50 years or so, and they just did it again, and now they're talking about militarizing. What are the possibilities? The Ukraine right now which is another hot spot for kicking off of world wars. It's like they just declared martial law. Like they just got into a dust up with Russia. Putin's not a guy you want to be screwing around with. What are the possibilities, people? Like, do you think people are getting more calm, or do you think people are getting more tense? Because I'm thinking more tense. But more reason to, dear listener, if you're listening, forget about the cults, forget about your church membership. It won't save you, right? You have your Christianity, your walk with Jesus Christ must be your own. That is the message that I bear. Is I once had an experience where I came to that realization that God loved me, that it was personal, and that loving Him back and being in that father-son relationship is what I was meant here to do, and it's mine. Yeah. And when I see articles like this, and I see these people's problems, it's like, well, clearly the problem is that you don't. And you're all right. Yeah, you're probably even saved. You're probably, if you died right now, you'd probably go to heaven. Who knows? I don't know. But one thing that's clear is that you don't know that it's yours. Those people can't take it from you. This is, like that article that you put up the other day about that lady worship leader who is now an atheist. Yeah. It's like, well, then you clearly never knew him. If that's all it took was to be barren, and to have your friends always telling you, well, maybe you don't pray hard enough, or maybe you don't fast enough, or maybe you don't do this. It's like, why were you listening? Why were you listening to those people? They're not responsible for the condition of your soul. You are.
And why didn't you know the word well enough to know that when they're saying these things and associating it with God, that you know enough to be like, that's not actually God. That's more American prosperity gospel type thought than the actual living God. Yeah. And just to add something to what you were saying there, I mean, obviously, if people know you in person, like I do, and if people have been following your podcast, like I have been, they know that these things that you're saying about Germany and Russia and all of that, that's not because you're xenophobic or go America, screw the rest of the world.
No, it's just because that's what's on the news.
That's not you.
Right. No, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not paranoid.
We're not shooting down the church and saying people need to go all start their own home groups as well. I don't think that either of us are saying that so much as we're saying examine these things that you're seeing, and just put two and two together. Put two and two together. Right. And make plans. And so it is your relationship with Christ that matters. You cannot blame somebody else if you were deceived, if you didn't actually care enough to seek out the truth. Are you walking with God? Are you pursuing Christ?
And by the way, and dear listener, if the answer is no, when you go into your bedroom and you turn off the lights and you lay on your bed and you close your eyes and you ask yourself, do I really seek after Christ? Do I really know Him? If the answer is no, that's fine. As a matter of fact, that puts you on prime real estate to get to know him. The very first thing out of Jesus' mouth on the Sermon on the Mount is, blessed are the brokenhearted, or the poor in spirit is the way that he put it. And he was referencing a passage in Isaiah where God was saying to Isaiah, nobody comes into my presence unless they are broken, unless they're sick, and it's not like they were like God made them sick. It's people that realize that they're broken and crippled and can't go on. And if you go into your place of prayer and meditation, you ask yourself, like, do I really care about the things of heaven? And you honestly come to that answer of, no, I really don't. You are on holy ground when you come to that place, because that's where you can call out to God and be honest and pray that prayer where the guy says, yes, Jesus, I do believe. Help me in my disbelief. No, Jesus, I don't actually care about your things. Can you please help me to care about your things? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, and here, this just came to mind, so I just want to share this.
Go ahead.
Awesome stuff, Pete. What you just said made me think about when Jesus was telling the parable of the sower.
Yeah.
And you have these 3 different kinds of soil. And there's actually only one that's producing fruit. And as I understand it, this is the key to understanding all of the other parables, that only one produces the crop, and it's the good soil.
Yeah.
And the rest, I mean, they're, for all intents and purposes, they're going the wide road through the wide gate that leads to destruction. And so the disciples, not just the apostles, but the disciples as well, people who were following Jesus, they came to Jesus. They were like, hey, so what's the deal with the parables? Why do you talk to people in those things? And Jesus said very clearly that because the message of the kingdom...
Wait. Dave, can you hear me? Dave, can you hear me?
Yeah.
You have to start. You have to start off from. And Jesus said the reason why I speak in parables is you have to start that whole thing over. I'm sorry.
Okay. Here, let me click some buttons. Okay. Is it on again? Are you hearing me?
Yep.
Okay. And Jesus shares very clearly that the reason why he's sharing the truths about the kingdom in parables is because the kingdom is given to those who are following, those who are seeking Jesus, those who are going after the truth, not to those who just want to be fed, or they just want to mock, or they just want to make fun, or they just want to make light of you because you're pursuing Christ. No. It's for the people who are actually noticing their brokenness.
Right.
I am broken. I am messed up. I don't have all of my junk together. Those are the people, like Pete said, you're in prime position to recognize,
right,
man, I don't have all of the answers. Is there truth to this? God honors that kind of stuff. He gives grace to the humble, but he resists the proud.
The proud, yeah. It's that paradox. It's like, that's why I'm saying, like, I'm sure there's going to be some people who hear me say that and be like, oh, that's blasphemous. It's like, no. It's paradoxical. Like, you cannot, that portion, that time when that guy comes to Jesus and says, yes, Jesus, I do believe, help me in my disbelief. Like, that is a powerful moment, because Jesus says to him, he says, listen, if your kid has any chance of living, it's going to be through your faith. So now I ask you, like, do you have faith that this can be done? And the guy says, holy moly, Lord Jesus, like, if my kid living or dying comes down to my faith, then my child, my progeny is going to die. So yes, Jesus, I believe, but man, if you don't come into this moment right now and help me in my disbelief, my kid is going to die. Will you please come and help me in my disbelief? That is a powerful prayer. You know what I mean? Like, you can go to God and say, you know what, God, I think the problem is I just don't believe you. Can you please help me in my disbelief? Because I think this is a real problem. And somebody's going to die if this problem doesn't get solved. You know what I mean? Like that's power. And it's in that broken place that prayer becomes as powerful as it is. Because it's honest. You know what I mean? It's like you can see in that guy's eyes, like, oh God, like, okay, yeah, I believe. Help me in my disbelief, please. You know, like, and so let that. We're gonna wrap it up because podcasts. Once I get a studio and I can have people in and stuff, like, I think the format can go longer. But listen, if you want to support the show, hit subscribe, hit share on your Facebook. All right, if you got this podcast from David's page or my page, hit share and let other people see it. Leave a comment, right? That's the number one thing that you can do if you want to keep this show going. Hit subscribe on my podcast. Now, Dave, you're currently you're with Youth for Christ right now, is that right?
Yes, sir. Yeah, we are currently raising funds to go serve our U.S. military servicemen and women in Europe. It's looking like it's probably going to be Germany, but my heart has always been for sharing the gospel and raising up disciples and equipping them, man, to be a lifelong disciples. So that's what we're working on.
Where can people come to throw a little dough your way? Do you got a PayPal or what do you got there?
Yeah, we don't do PayPal.
Okay.
It's through the organization Youth for Christ. If you want to find out more about that, you can go to servingthosewhoserve.weebly.com, and you can read both about our journey as well as clicking on the link. I've got a page there that will take you to our giving link, and man, you can control everything there. If you want to give a one-time thing, what we're really seeking and what we need is...
You're cutting out. Hold on.
At the $50 a month
mark. Hang on, you got to start that last whole sentence over again. What you said? What you really need is what?
Okay.
Sorry.
What we're really seeking and what we need to be on mission is 70 more people giving at $50 a month, and we will be on mission. We will be sharing the gospel, and we will be involved in the lives of these students and these military families, and walking through some of the difficult questions that we've been talking about today, and Pete continues to talk about every time he does this podcast. We're going to be walking through that with these families who serve for the freedoms that we enjoy as Americans.
Now, one more time with that site. Was it Weebly? Did you say? You gotta say it again.
It's serving those who. Okay, it's servingthosewhoserve.weebly.com.
Gotcha. And that'll take it. They'll see you if they just put that in there.
Yes, that's the website, and it's got our blog there for our Youth for Christ journey, as well as a giving link page that will take them to a place where they can give.
Excellent.
Like I said, with only 70 people giving $50 a month, we would be there on mission. But obviously, whatever people would be led to give, kind of the same with you. But I know you've got other things working out, with like people who can give on Amazon just by recognizing Arch Advocate as
not anymore. They don't not anymore. No.
Oh, never mind. You'll have to cut that out then.
No, I'll leave it in there. But no, Amazon's weird. They pulled my application 3 times. So I guess I'm just gonna have to publish books and raise money that way. But
there are definitely other ways to give to Pete and Arch Advocate, and I hope that people will do that. And whether people are led to give there, or with servingthosewhoserve.weebly.com, or some other place. Man, be someone who uses your finances, the things that God has blessed you with, to bless others.
Yep. If you love something, support it, or else it goes away.
Yep, for sure.
My man, thank you so much. That was another great conversation with you. The first that has been recorded. I'm sure there's going to be many more in the future. Pastor David Clinkscales. I call him Pastor because he doesn't insist on it. That's why. Thank you so much for joining us. That was the Arch Advocate Show. Thank you again, and we will talk to you all tomorrow.